Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Today's guest, WNBA star Renee Montgomery, is sitting out this basketball season to focus on the fight for social justice. In a tweet announcing her decision on June 18th, Renee wrote, quote, "After much thought, I've decided to opt out of the 2020 WNBA season. There's work to be done off the court in so many areas of our community. Social justice reform isn't going to happen overnight. But I do feel that now is the time and moments equal momentum. Let's keep it going." On today's show, we'll talk about what went into the decision and the change Renee hopes to inspire in her community. We talk about how to have the courage and the clarity to make tough decisions, the power of purpose, and living your life's mission, and the lessons she learned on the basketball floor that she's applied to life off the court. An 11-year WNBA veteran, Renee currently plays for the Atlanta Dream as the team's starting point guard and was a two-time WNBA champion as the member of the Minnesota Lynx. She's a former standout at UConn, where she played under coach Geno Auriemma, a favorite guest of this show, and led the Huskies to a national championship during a perfect 39-0 season her senior year in 2009. The WNBA season is set to tip off in the bubble, as they call it, this weekend in Bradenton, Florida. Renee won't be there, but as you'll learn from our conversation, she will be leveraging her platform for a new purpose. If you want to know more about Renee's work, visit ReneeMontgomeryFoundation.org and follow her on Instagram at It's Renee M. It's Renee M. I hope this conversation inspires you like it did for me. Let's dig right in. Here's my conversation with Renee Montgomery. All right, Renee Montgomery, thank you for joining me. This is going to be an awesome and real, we're going to keep it real, all right, conversation. You ready?
Listen, I'm ready.
I know you're always sitting on go. This is going to be good. So here's the thing. By now, probably a lot of people know about your decision to sit out this WNBA season, right? To focus on, fighting for social justice reform. Tell me, when did you start thinking about this as a possibility, as a reality, and then, of course, making this decision?
I would say about 3 weeks before I actually announced. So I announced that I was going to be opting out on June 18th. And I did that because I had a Juneteenth event coming up. And I just wanted to go ahead and announce it and get everyone, to see where my head was at. I would say probably 2 or 3 weeks before that, I had started talking to my parents and my family, just telling them what I was thinking and, what my focus was on at the current moment. And everyone supported me. So that was like, wow, okay, great. My parents told me pray on it, sleep on it. And then if you still feel the same way, do it. And I still felt the same way. So on June 18th, I announced.
That's amazing. And how did you find, there's so many people in life, right, that want to make big decisions, that struggle with making big decisions, right? I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people listening right now in the environment that we're in that are navigating difficult decisions. How'd you get the clarity? How'd you get the clarity to make what is a really big decision?
Well, I was born and raised in the pews of St. Paul Baptist Church. So I think clarity comes when you slow down and you're still for a second. So that's why my parents told me to pray about it, think on it. And basically what they were saying was just be still for a second and see what your heart, what your mind is telling you. So I would really say that, my faith is what made me so strong and clear in that moment.
In the Players Tribune, you mentioned your nephews and what does their future look like? Tell me a little bit about that, how that played into your decision.
Well, when George Floyd was murdered, a lot of the talk was he's big in stature. To answer the questions of why were 3 policemen sitting on this man, one of the answers was that he was big in stature, like he was actually physically big.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made me nervous, because if that's the reason that they feel the need to have that many cops, arrest a man, that was scary to me, because I have nephews that are 6'5". I have nephews that are 6'4". They're actually big in stature. I have a 6'3" nephew. They're big. And so they might not see them as these fun-loving, sport-playing young men. They might see them as a threat. And to me, that was terrifying.
For sure. And I know that you like to shine the light, right, on your fellow UConn alum and WNBA player Maya Moore, who stepped away at the peak of her career to fight for criminal justice and to fight for reform. I'm a little bit curious what you thought of her decision at the time, and if you've had any conversations with her since.
Well, I definitely have had a conversation since she's decided to sit out. But, we didn't even actually talk about that.
Really?
At the time when she did it, I didn't understand why she couldn't do both, and then you fast forward 2 years later and I get it. If that's what your mind is focused on, if that's where your passion is, I get following your passion. But it's interesting because, Coach Cheryl Reeve, and she's the head coach of that Minnesota team that Maya and I both played on, she said she's not surprised that I opted out. And to me, that's a compliment. And I'm not surprised Maya Moore opted out. And I hope that could be a compliment to her as well.
Some people may see this as you giving up a platform, right? The on the court and playing in the league. And I know that there has been similar discussions in the NBA around this topic. How do you view that? What's your take on that when people maybe push on you and say that?
Yeah, and I understand what they're saying. They're saying that, basketball provides a large platform where you can get your message out and you can be heard. I understand that thought process. I also understand that if I'm doing things on outside of the bubble, and I've also talked to multiple people that are going to help me have another platform. The beauty of social media is everyone has a platform.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I'm just going to use the platform that I do have in social media, in my friends, and the contacts I have. And I'm going to use that platform and make as much noise as I can.
How scary was the decision, right? When you think about the basketball has been a part of your identity, I know since you were 10. How scary was the decision for you? How did you lean into that fearlessness, if you will, and sort of make this shift? Yeah,
it was very scary because it's all I know. Basketball has been all I've known my whole entire life. So just under that thought process of leaving a comfort zone, that's what it was. That's the scary part. You're leaving a comfort zone and going to the unknown. So going into the unknown is always scary. But again, I just had this confidence that I was making the right decision, I'm sure, because of my faith.
I found this interesting, and I don't know if you've had the conversation yet, but one of the owners of the team, I know that you've had a little bit of a back and forth, and you invited a dialogue with her. Have you been able to have that conversation? And tell me a little bit about that, right? When your leader, when your owner and you aren't aligned, tell me how that shows up for you, and have you guys been able to have a conversation?
No, we haven't had a conversation, but the reason that I wrote the open letter is because although one person may say one thing, a lot of people believe that thing that the person says. So whenever somebody asks me a question, I never get offended or I never get mad, because there's probably a lot of people that want to know the answer to that exact same question. So I thought if our owner wrote and feels that way, well, maybe I should give a different perspective, and maybe some other people, not just her, will see my point of view, see it from my perspective. So sometimes when I address something, it's addressing a larger audience. There's a lot of people that feel that sports shouldn't have any social issues involved. A lot of people just feel that sports should just be sports. So I just wanted to address that thought process.
Well, maybe you can talk about that, because there are so many people, right, that say keep politics, keep it out of sports, right?
Right.
What do you say to that?
I'd say that politics have been in sports for as long as sports have been integrated. There's plenty of stories where you see NBA players who had to set up a game because that they didn't get served the day before by a restaurant. There were plenty of times. I know we all remember in the Olympics when they put their fists up. There's plenty of times where politics and social issues are at the intersection of sports. That's because sports is where everything intersects.
Yeah, no question. It's a heck of a platform. Obviously, that I know in the environment that we're in right now, right? So many people are craving and miss, whether you're an athlete or a fan, right?
Right.
A lot of people, I think, are on their own journey right now to educate themselves, at some level, maybe to amplify the voices of others and to learn how to use their own voice. How have you done that on your own journey? And how would you encourage others out there listening who are trying to amplify their voice or trying to use their own voice? What would you tell them?
I was speaking to the student athletes at Georgia Tech a week ago, and they were asking that same thing. How can they make an impact? How can they amplify their voices? And I told them the same thing that I kind of hinted to before. Social media has made it very easy to connect with people. It's made it very easy to be in tune, have a voice. So I would say find like-minded people. If you feel very strongly about voter suppression, you literally could type in hashtag voter suppression and get a whole group of people that feel the exact same way you do. Now you see like-minded people. Maybe you see something that they're doing. Maybe you see petitions that they're pushing, and now you're in a group. So I just always say, find a group, find your tribe.
Yeah. But I'm also hearing you say, based on your sort of dialogue with the dream ownership, that there's also a power in being curious and attempting to connect even with people who may appear to be on the other side of the aisle, that's in part where the conversation can begin too.
It can. It definitely can. But you have to be up for that conversation,
Sure.
So I would never encourage someone to engage in that conversation if that's what they're not up for. Because if those people don't come to the table with an open mind of, I'm trying to understand you, can you understand me? Then the conversation may not go as it should. So I encourage people that want to keep that open dialogue going. But if you just want to get involved and have your voice heard, I encourage people to find your tribe.
Yeah, sure. I want to shift a little bit to your background, Renee, because you have such an interesting perspective. And I've heard you talk a lot about the influence of your parents, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, and also your experiences growing up in West Virginia. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that has shaped you as you reflect on where you are today?
Yeah, so growing up, being submerged in another group's culture, and I say that because in West Virginia, we have a 3.6% Black population. So automatically, I'm submerged in another culture when our percentage is that low. So being submerged in other cultures, it gives you perspective. It gives you a different insight on things. It helps you understand differences, but also similarities. Because when I was younger, I was constantly trying to show similarities, how I was alike, how we were different. So from a young age, I started to kind of go about things differently. I saw things differently. And I think it did shape me for who I am today. When I was on First Take, Stephen A. Smith asked me a question about, he put it very eloquently, but I'm just going to paraphrase it. But he said, basically, if you were a man and playing in the NBA, would I have still opted out? And a lot of people, after I got off this show, I looked on Twitter, and a lot of people were mad he asked that, but I wasn't mad at all because I'm sure a lot of people thought that. And that experience of growing up in West Virginia, being raised by my parents, that's who I am. So even if I was a man making millions, that's who I would be, because that has shaped who I am.
After hearing from so many listeners about what they need right now, about how they need an entire mindset shift, we created an innovative monthly program called Game Changer Leadership Huddles. Join us and get a monthly dose of inspiration and action steps you can take right now. It will be the best, I promise you, 57 minutes you spend every month. Sign up today at mollyfletcher.com/leadership-huddles. That's mollyfletcher.com/leadership-huddles. What's cool about what I'm hearing you talk about, and we teach this a lot in our training, is is how to shift inside of difficult conversations from defensiveness to curiosity. It feels like you do that so naturally that, or regardless of what side you're on, that you are insatiably curious, whether they agree with you or not. Because to me, it sounds like you look at those moments, those conversations as an opportunity to grow. And
Exactly.
I believe curiosity is one of the most untapped, in my opinion, leadership traits.
Because if you can understand why they think something, then you can begin to understand them more. Well, maybe they only think this because their great grandpa told them that. They don't honestly they're not standing hard in that belief. It's just, that's just what their whole family did.
For
so
sure.
Then you can tell them well, that is actually offensive. And then somebody could literally be like, oh, okay, well, I won't do it anymore. I didn't even know it was offensive. So that's why I always you have to give people because certain things are learned through different generations, and they could be things that may, now be tone deaf or insensitive. People didn't know. That's just what their family's always done. So I always try to give people, the ability to understand me and me to understand them.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. And to me, curiosity, when you think about it at the core, it drives connection because it allows you to understand, like you just said, their perspective, their point of view, which creates conversation. And to me, conversation can create an opportunity, at least, with curiosity for connection, which is, I believe, as human beings, what we want.
Exactly. Connection will make unity.
Yeah, right on. You've, I think this is cool. I mean, a lot of people don't know the sacrifice that WNBA players make, that professional women basketball players make, as well as obviously any level of professional athlete. And you've played basketball all over the world, and a lot of players, most WNBA players play year round, right? During the summer, and then they go, play overseas
Correct.
for the rest of the year, right? A lot of people don't know that. Where have you played professionally, and what has that? How has that shaped you?
Oh man, I played all over, honestly.
I know, right?
I played in Israel, Australia, Hungary, France. I played in Russia for multiple seasons, Lithuania, Turkey. Pretty much been all over. And the thing that's taught me is, again, I was submerged in other people's culture, so it's perspective. Something I took from Europe is that they're very slow in a sense of they enjoy life. Here in America, everything's so fast. Get your food fast. Do everything fast. Get to work. We're focused on whatever the task is at hand. But in Europe, they're a lot slower. They enjoy their meals. They sit down. They have their coffee. So that's something that I adopted into my lifestyle.
That's fantastic. What about some of the other places that you live? What are some of the things how has it shaped your perspective? You talked about perspective. How has it shaped it, changed it, made it evolve?
Well, growing up in the church, when I played in Israel, you can only imagine being in the motherland, Jerusalem, the Dead Sea, all those different things that I read about growing up. It was almost like a book coming to life, like I never really planned on visiting those places. But when the opportunity presented itself, I was so excited to do so. So I would say just being in Australia, the time difference is almost a 12-hour time difference. So that's interesting in itself because your day is flipped upside down. It's daytime there and it's nighttime here. So just those different dynamics, it helps you just adjust and again, see different cultures and life from a different perspective.
I'm a big fan of using sports as an analogy because I think we can all learn a lot, from looking at really sports locker rooms. And particularly right now in terms of the diversity in the room and the diversity in the locker rooms and how people come together as a team to understand each other, right? And in sports and clubhouses and locker rooms to challenge each other and of course to support each other. What are some of the greatest lessons you've learned from being an athlete on a team in a diverse locker room?
I would say the best thing that I learned was how to communicate. I learned how to communicate with my teammates. I learned how to see how people want to be communicated to. I think that's most important. You can start to, as you're talking to people, even people you just meet, you can start to see how they like to be communicated to. So I've learned that skill set to talk to people how they prefer to be talked to. And in basketball, it's so important because you have a little bit of time to get your message across. Everything's moving so fast, and you need to be able to get it across in a way that is perceived is taken well.
Mm-hmm.
That they receive it well. And so that skill set that I learned in sports of how to communicate with. And you got to remember, when I was playing overseas, not all of my teammates spoke English, and definitely not all of them spoke it fluently. So that's a whole different dynamic as well, communicating to teammates that may not be able to even understand every single thing you're saying. So I think just that level of having to connect with people and learning how to connect, that's what's helping me now when I'm doing things off the court.
Yeah, and speaking of off the court, what are some of the things you're most passionate about getting involved with right now that you've got and created more time for yourself? I think I saw that you're part of LeBron James initiative, I believe, right? But what else is on your plate?
Correct. Yeah, so almost right after I announced that I was opting out, LeBron James' team reached out and asked if I wanted to join the campaign, the More Than a Vote campaign. I obviously ecstatically said yes. And then as time went on and I was figuring out what I want to do, I'm like, look, okay, I'm going to do a voting campaign as well. And we're going to call it Remember the 3rd of November, because people need to connect this passion that they feel right now with voting. And I think the way to help them connect to that would be, first of all, teaching them about politics 101. What is a Democrat? What is a Republican? There was a poll that I read somewhere where they asked people who was the commander in chief, and people didn't know that answer. They didn't know that that was the president. And that's not to shame people. That's to say that we need to be connected and understand politics more and how it affects our everyday life, because then I think people will feel the need to vote, the responsibility to vote more. So that's the first one. And the second one is called The Last Yard. And my mom was in the education system for 30 plus years. She was a college professor at West Virginia State University. And she said that she would see so many students drop out for amounts of 100 to 1,000, just that small amount where they couldn't cover their books, their tuition, just the last little bit that they couldn't raise that money. They end up having to drop out of school. So The Last Yard will be giving grants out to students from 2 HBCUs that we select to help them get that last yard.
Ah, super cool.
Those are two of the things that I'm like most excited about. Can't wait for us to launch these initiatives and get going.
Yeah, that is awesome. Good for you. My buddy Steve Smith, who played basketball at Michigan State, I don't know if you know Smitty at all, but he did something like that, and maybe still does for Michigan State and with kids and helping them get through college.
That's awesome. I definitely know him from Turner. We're both in the Turner halls.
Yeah, right. He's wonderful. He's an amazing human being. But in any event, you guys have the same heart there because you're both doing awesome and similar things to help kids get through.
Thank you.
Get through. So we got to dig into basketball a little bit. We got to talk a little bit of hoops. So you played at UConn under Geno, who I was so fortunate to have on my podcast. For those of you guys listening, it was actually episode 19. It's one of our most popular conversations. So you got any favorite Geno stories for me, or and even a little bit around what did you learn from him, and what has he meant to you both on the court, right, but off the court as well?
Yeah, I would say the thing that he taught me on the court was that you have to do it right so many times that you can't get it wrong. So I used to be excited when I would finally get something right. And he was like, all right, now do it 10 times straight so that I know you can't get it wrong. And then that concept kind of shifted my whole thought process of how I train and how I move and how I prepare. So now, I'm known for being a professional in a sense that I'm on time. I know my stuff, and the reason I do that is because I want to take out any things that I can control to where that can mess me up in the game. I want to take those out. I want to over prepare.
Sure.
And now in my coach basketball life, and I'm not saying that I'm retired, but I'm saying now when I'm doing these things off the court, it's so imperative because I get prepared. I prepare myself for everything. And when you're prepared, you take out a lot of the room for you to fail. Absolutely.
And you approach these moments confidently, don't you, when you're prepared?
Yeah, definitely. It makes you more confidence comes from preparation for me personally.
For sure. You've won a ton of championships in your career, right? You won one in college and 2 in the WNBA. And I'm sure others, if we count high school, and I'm sure in the International League, what makes the difference? What do you see as the biggest difference between a good team, and there's a lot of good teams out there, right, and a championship team? Yeah, well, first you have to have talent. And a lot of people like to overlook that and say, work. You have to have talent to win the championship. You do. But when you have that talent, it's what you do with it. When you have that talent, how can you mesh those pieces together?
how is the chemistry on that team? Sometimes you'll see a team and everybody's like, how are they losing with this player, that player, and that player? Yeah, they don't have chemistry. They don't have that connection. They're not playing as a unit. So I would say what makes a team go from good to great is their commitment to being a good team and not just a good player.
And what do you see as some of the most common ingredients, right? You got to have talent. But to me, to your point, it's talent plus discipline, talent plus preparation, talent plus, what else comes up for you when you think about the difference between those when, talent plus what?
I would say talent plus commitment. And then when you say commitment, it's all of those things. Commitment to being disciplined, commitment to being prepared, commitment to being a good teammate. That's something that's overlooked a lot. When a superstar is a great teammate, you're going to have a good team. Mm-hmm. Like you just know off top, because if that's what the culture of the team is going to be, then you're going to have a great team. So I would say just commitment to what it takes. And that could be discipline, that could be preparation, that could be being a great teammate.
So, Renee, real quick, before we close, tell me a little bit about your foundation and that work, and also how people can keep up with you and what you're doing over the next several months.
Yeah, so a lot of the things that I'm going to be doing when I talk about these initiatives is going to be through my foundation. So my foundation is a 501c3 operating here in Atlanta. And the exciting thing about it is we're meshing all of those things. My mission statement is to teach people the skill sets I learned in sports, the things we talked about. The mission statement literally is to teach people and spread positivity through the things I learned in sports, confidence, teamwork. That's our mission statement. And now I just get to do it on a larger scale. So I'm excited about that. And I would say follow the journey, because there's going to be some fun things happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. So real quick, a couple rapid fires for you. One word to describe yourself.
Blessed.
One word others would use to describe you.
Confident.
Who, you're a fellow Atlantan. We both are. What's some of your favorite places in Atlanta?
Oh, man. I need to eat out more. I would say that's tough, because it's like I would say the aquarium, if we're talking like attractions. I think that was pretty awesome to see the aquarium, and my best friend works there. I would also say food-wise, this is going to be so terrible, but Cheesecake Factory will have to be my answer. It's so bad. But the only reason I say that is because I just had it yesterday.
Sure. It's top of mind, girl. All right. So one last question. The show's called Game Changer. So who's a game changer who inspires you and why?
Game changer would have to be my mom. And I would just say, because when I found out all of these stories about how she was an activist, she never told us these before. And so when I found them out this year, I was so impressed with how I never knew everything she's been through, because of how she treats people, because of how she moves, how she taught me to always extend the olive branch. You would have never known so many things happened to her. You would never known that she was an activist and had to do so many different things in her day. You would never know about her behavior. So that's always inspiring to me.
That is awesome. Renee Montgomery, what a treat to have you on. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you for having me. Thank you, Molly.
Well, after this conversation, I'm a huge fan of Renee, on and off the court. And what a great message on living your life's purpose fearlessly. I'm excited to stay connected to her on her journey. Here are a few of my favorite takeaways from today's conversation. Number 1, give yourself the space to find clarity. Sometimes you have to pause to find your purpose. Boy, in today's time, that couldn't be more true. Number 2, embrace tough conversations. Don't avoid a topic because it's uncomfortable or unfamiliar to you. Listen and learn. Be open to different perspectives and shift to curiosity inside of these conversations. Number 3, don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. That was the lesson that Renee shared from her UConn coach, Geno Auriemma. And wow, what a great way to think about preparation and to think about the pursuit of excellence. Don't cheat yourself. Put in the hard work. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.